Mike never expected when he rescued an abandoned puppy that a few months later he would realize that what he thought was a dog was actually not. It meant he would have to start entirely anew with his life to keep the animal. As Mike was loading his shopping bags into his car one day, something on a nearby parked truck caught his eye. There was a little cage with a small puppy in it on the back. The dog looked so miserable and pathetic that it broke Mike's heart immediately. But the puppy was also beautiful. It had the fluffiest coat he had ever seen, and a pair of sweet eyes he immediately fell in love with. When the truck's owner returned, Mike lingered to talk to him about the puppy and asked where he got it. But what the man said was not good. The dog had been left near his farm, he said. It kept laying down on the farm, and he and his farm hands would chase it off, but it would not go away. A major road ran right by their farm, and they were always finding animals there that people had abandoned. They didn't keep all of them, but still tried to find them good homes. But this poor little puppy had made the farmer mad. He didn't have a family to take care of him, so he must have been hungry. He'd followed his nose looking for food and ended up inside the chicken coop. He had killed some chickens, and others had died from invader-induced shock. The farmer was a poor man and couldn't afford such a loss. He knew the pup needed to go, but he couldn't bear to do it himself. Rather, he took the pup to the vet and inquired about euthanizing the dog for a lower fee. Mike's eyes glistened when he heard this story. He knew he couldn't let the puppy be put down just because he was alone and hungry. He was simply acting on the instinct of any animal: survival. He needed to do something, so he offered to take the pup off the farmer's hands. He was even prepared to buy him so the farmer could replace some of his livestock. In return, he would have a beautiful puppy and some much-needed companionship. It was a win-win situation. The farmer agreed, provided he never saw the dog on his property again. Mike hugged the pup close, and its entire body went limp. The poor thing must have been so frightened, and he was thankful he had gotten there just in time to help. Now he just needed to figure out what to do with the puppy. He wasn't expecting to get a dog at that time. He was living in an apartment without a garden, but he ended up clearing enough space in his house for the pup to romp. He named the dog Lucky, and the pair formed an immediate bond. Mike didn't know if it was at least partly because Lucky knew that he had saved him, or if there was just a connection between them that transcended anything he had ever known. Either way, he never knew that a dog could actually be his best friend. The pair a great time together, but Mike also needed to ensure that Lucky received enough exercise, or he could become frustrated, and even a little destructive. He loved stealing his owner's hats and hoodies, but he wasn't exactly gentle with them. The hats were typically chewed to pieces, and the hoodies became his favorite place to lounge and sleep. Because Lucky was energetic and playful, Mike assumed that training him and bringing him on walks would be quite a challenge. But the puppy remained surprisingly calm and compliant. He didn't have any problem working at Mike's pace and walking in the woods around them. Until he spotted other dogs, that is. Then he would completely lose his mind. He wanted to play with every dog he saw, even those that didn't want to be his friend. It was very sweet, and everyone always complimented Mike on how well-behaved his puppy was. Lucky was an awesome dog with lots of skills, but there was one tiny problem that was tricky to solve. Lucky just would not stop growing. Over time, he got huge. His black coat became even fluffier, and he matured into a gorgeous adult dog. Fully grown, most people reacted with fear when they saw him. Mike tried to tell himself it was normal, but even he had to admit he was a little worried. What if the dog had a kind of hormone imbalance that was making him grow like this? Mike was scared of what he would hear from the vet, but he needed to know what was wrong with his best friend. He hoped all was well and that Lucky was just a really big dog, but that is not what the vet told him. Mike took Lucky to the vet's office and let him inside. As soon as the nurse spotted Lucky, she shrieked in surprise. They wanted him to go into another room, sure that Lucky would harm another animal or maybe even the humans in the same space. Mike knew better, but was not going to say anything. Lucky was just a few months old at this point, but he was already bigger than most giant breed dogs. Going out for walks was amusing when he wanted to befriend and capture the attention of a smaller dog. Mike had been sure his puppy was born of two purebred wolf dogs, but months later he would discover that his sweet companion was not a dog at all. When the vet walked in and spotted Lucky sitting behind Mike with his huge head on his shoulder, he laughed. The big boy simply adored his human, that much was evident. But all of that would change in the next few moments. The good news was that there was nothing wrong with Lucky. He was in perfect health. The other bit of news, the dog was a wolf. Sorry for the interruption, but before moving forward with the story, please like the video and subscribe to this channel. We very much appreciate it. Thank you very much. A pure Canadian black wolf without a single dog in his family tree. They had no clue why he was left on the farmer's land. Maybe his pack was not returning to pick him up, or someone tried to adopt the wolf pup, and they noticed halfway through the process it was a dumb idea. No matter how it took place, his destiny became tied to Mike's, who, without realizing it, had been nurturing him as a puppy for months with love. Understatement of the year. He couldn't believe it. Lucky had never been aggressive, and other than preferring meat to kibble, Mike had never suspected he wasn't a normal dog. He was so domesticated that there was no way he would ever survive in the wild if Mike set him free now, and at the same time he could not keep treating the wolf as he would have treated a dog. It wasn't all bad news, but it would alter their lives. The vet told Mike he had to call the local wildlife people, and he wasn't sure what they would do. Mike resided in the city in a residential home. It wasn't quite appropriate lodgings for a wolf, let alone one of Lucky's size. If Mike wanted to keep his best friend with him, he needed to make some lifestyle adjustments. A few days later, a local wildlife inspector visited the pair. He would determine if the wolf should be confiscated or if Mike should keep him. The second he saw them together, he couldn't deny the incredible bond they had, so he decided he didn't want to disrupt that. The first step, get the wolf outside city limits. It just was not right to have a wild animal like that in a town. Mike sold his place, cashed out all his assets and savings, and purchased a small piece of land that was far more suitable for raising a wolf. The inspector had never dealt with a situation like this. Most laws were aimed at ensuring that regular people wouldn't be keeping wild animals as pets, and he told Mike that he'd have to do his utmost to prove that the wolf would be able to stay in his care. Most people would have given up. But Mike loved that wolf like it was his child and would do anything to keep him. Just thinking of Lucky going to a shelter or a different home froze his blood. It would have been such a heartbreaking thing for the wolf, who loved his human too much for them to be separated, but also for Mike himself. The countryside provided Lucky with ample space to run and play, but he required a secure place that would ensure the safety of people around him. There was one other big hurdle Mike needed to clear before he could relax. Mike had to be licensed as an expert in animal rescue to keep the wild animal. He needed to prove he had everything a wild animal might require. So much had changed in what seemed like a very short time, and Mike wanted to share it all with his friends and family over social media. Mike began with videos of his little puppy and the big boy he had grown up to be, and then gently introduced his audience to the news. However, the bond between Lucky and his human made the real headlines. It was amazing how close they were. The wolf was just like a happy puppy and would sometimes try to nibble on Mike's ears or the top of his hoodie. Though he was big and had very sharp teeth, he never harmed Mike. He had a lot of energy, but the second Mike would raise his voice, Lucky would calm down. This was truly amazing to see, but it did have some unforeseen effects on the social media posts about him. His story went viral as various videos of him were shared by his family on their own channels, and all went mad from there. Others thought that he had made a huge error by adopting an animal from an unknown farmer. Others wondered how he had never suspected that Lucky might not be a dog. Some said he was doing him a disservice by keeping him. However, most comments fortunately came from kind people who realized that he only wanted the best for Lucky. They were invested in the handsome man and the magnificent wolf. They wanted to know what the pair were up to from day to day, and his following skyrocketed in a matter of weeks. But Mike didn't care about any of that. He needed to concentrate on preparing the place for his upcoming inspection. He spent all of his finances making sure the pen was prepared for the wolf to sleep in and budgeting what was most necessary. The inspector decided, however, that the enclosure was no place for him. Lucky, he said, required a lot more space. Mike had expected to release him all day long, letting him take long walks, play, as he always had. But to the inspector, that was beside the point. When the inspector told Mike that all of the required parameters had to be met, there would be no negotiation. It was a take-it-or-leave-it proposition. He told Mike that he had a few weeks to make the necessary changes, or Lucky would be confiscated. Although it broke the inspector's heart to see the clear love they had for each other, his hands were tied and there was nothing he could do. The animal had to have all of its needs covered, or otherwise he couldn't license Mike's home as a shelter. In an ideal world, he would have taken the wolf right then and there, but he wanted to root for them, wanted to believe they could do it. His warning became a lifeline, but not for Mike. For him, it was the end of the world. He had no real hope of ever getting everything done. He said he had racked up all his savings purchasing the property and getting it to that stage. He was still working his day job in the city, but that would never suffice for all the upgrades. He had to come to terms with the fact that he was going to have to say goodbye to Lucky. He wanted to ease the burden as best he could on the wolf, so he began having less contact with him. But that only tore the two of them apart. Lucky became depressed, and Mike didn't know how to help. The wolf was just too bonded to him. Would he even make it if they took him from the only family he had ever known? Mike didn't know, and he was beginning to feel ill at the thought of everything that could go wrong. But then something miraculous occurred that made a world of difference. One supportive friend posted about Mike and Lucky's struggle and wanted the world to come together to help them. Suddenly, everyone was seeking out ways that they could help Mike and Lucky. In less time than Mike even dared to believe, he had fundraised enough money to make all the changes he needed to his property. He learned later that even the inspector had been in on the act. And when he returned to the property to assess Mike's progress, he was thrilled to see everything was up to code. He had never been so pleased to tell someone the good news. Mike would be able to keep Lucky for the rest of his life. The young man rejoiced, and his supporters online cheered along with him. Life was far less stressful now that he possessed all the correct paperwork to care for his friend. But he wasn't finished there. That he was able to give Lucky a home was great, but now he felt compelled to do more. There were still other animals that needed help, and Mike now had the ability to give them a good home. He just needed the resources to make it happen. It reinforced this idea I had that many people want to do something for animals, but may not have the time or the ability, but are more than happy to support someone to do so. Mike took it upon himself to design some Lucky swag and start selling it online. He also got lots of offers from people wanting to help take care of the wolf and the other animals and accepted their acts of kindness with gratitude. But that wasn't all. Word had gotten around about his native instinct with animals, so whenever anyone heard about wolves or wolf hybrids in need, he was the first person they called. Mike could never turn away any animal in distress. Another bonus was that Lucky was able to make friends to play with. Not exactly friends of his own size, because most wolves were smaller than him, but at least ones who could play with him without getting hurt. But Mike wasn't married to just caring for wolves. Any wild animals that needed care would be treated at his sanctuary. Most recently, for example, he shared videos of the latest additions to the family, some belly-rub-loving wild boars. It seems that Mike can bond with any animal. The day he discovered that little puppy sitting in a little cage in the back of the farmer's truck was also the day he found his true calling. He has already changed so many lives, and he seems to have no intention to stop. Mike's biggest dream is to build a ranch where all animals are safe, so he has a piggy bank for everything he hopes to save. He hopes to allow Lucky the ability to live as close to the wild as possible within the safety of the sanctuary. Lucky is a massive animal that loves head scratches, and he will never be able to live on his own. But Mike hopes to eventually give him the next best thing. In the meantime, it's heartening to know that he continues giving the animals he looks after as much love and attention as he can. Life has changed immeasurably from the days in the city when they thought Lucky was only a dog. But the connection between human being and creature is as powerful as ever. And that is something which will always be the same. Did you enjoy this story? Would you have rescued little Lucky? Would you want to live in an animal sanctuary? Tell us in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, please consider subscribing to this channel and hitting that like button. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.